I found human teeth scattered in the snow outside my cabin last Tuesday morning. Fresh teeth, still bloody at the roots, arranged in a perfect circle around my front door. And when you hear what I discovered was leaving those teeth during the worst blizzard in Montana's history, you'll understand why winter will never feel the same again. My name is Jake, and I work as a fire lookout for the Forest Service in the Glacier National Park area of northwestern Montana. Every winter, I spend 4 months alone in a remote cabin, monitoring weather conditions and watching for signs of avalanche danger. It's isolated work. The nearest town is 47 miles away, and during heavy snow, I can go weeks without seeing another human being. I've been doing this job for 6 years, and I've always loved the solitude. There's something peaceful about being surrounded by nothing but pristine wilderness and the silence that only comes with deep snow. My cabin sits at 8,200 feet elevation, accessible only by snowmobile or cross-country skis once the roads close in November. This winter started like any other. I arrived at the cabin on November 15th with enough supplies to last until April. Canned food, propane, medical supplies, and a satellite radio for emergency communication. The cabin itself is basic but sturdy. One room with a wood stove, a small kitchen area, and a loft where I sleep. For the first month, everything was normal. I checked weather instruments twice daily, filed reports with headquarters, and spent my evenings reading or playing guitar. The snow was heavy that December, almost 4 feet by Christmas, but I'm used to harsh winters. But on December 28th, things started to change. I woke up that morning to find tracks in the snow outside my cabin. Not animal tracks. I know every animal print in these mountains. These were different. They looked almost human, but wrong somehow, too long, with what appeared to be claw marks at the tip of each toe impression. The tracks circled my cabin 3 times, then disappeared into the tree line. I followed them for about 100 yards before they simply ended, as if whatever made them had vanished into thin air. I reported it to headquarters, describing them as unusual animal tracks, possibly from an injured bear. But I knew they weren't bear tracks. I'd seen plenty of bear prints, and these were something else entirely. The next night I heard scratching sounds on my roof. Slow, deliberate scratching, like something was trying to claw through the metal roofing. It started around 11 p.m. and continued for about 20 minutes. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside to investigate, but the scratching stopped the moment I opened the door. I shined my light up at the roof and saw deep gouges in the metal, parallel lines about 4 inches apart, as if something with massive claws had been trying to tear through. The third incident happened 3 days later, during the worst blizzard I'd experienced in my 6 years on the job. The wind was howling at over 60 miles per hour, and the snow was coming down so hard I couldn't see 5 feet beyond my windows. I was sitting by the wood stove, reading, when I heard something that made my blood freeze. Knocking. Someone was knocking on my door. Slow, rhythmic knocks, barely audible over the storm. I sat perfectly still, listening. The nearest human was 47 miles away, and no one could survive traveling in a blizzard this severe. It was impossible for anyone to be at my door. But the knocking continued. I approached the door slowly, my heart pounding. "Who's there?" I called out. The knocking stopped. I waited for maybe 10 minutes, then carefully opened the door. The wind nearly knocked me backward, and the snow was so thick I couldn't see anything. But there, in the snow directly in front of my door, were those same strange tracks. They led away from the cabin and disappeared into the blizzard. Over the next week, the incidents escalated. I started finding things in the snow around my cabin. Small animal bones, arranged in patterns that seemed too deliberate to be natural. Rocks stacked in careful piles. And twice, I found dead birds placed on my doorstep, not killed by predators, but arranged as if they'd been positioned there deliberately. My radio communications with headquarters became spotty. Some days I couldn't reach them at all, and when I could, there was always strange interference, sounds like breathing or whispers in the background static. But the worst part was the feeling of being watched. Every time I went outside to check my instruments or gather firewood, I had the overwhelming sensation that something was observing me from the tree line. I never saw anything directly, but I could feel eyes on me constantly. On January 15th, during another heavy snowstorm, I decided to set up my camera to try to capture whatever was visiting my cabin at night. I positioned a trail camera aimed at my front door and another pointed toward the area where the tracks usually appeared. If something was coming to my cabin, I was going to get proof. The next morning, I checked the cameras eagerly. The first camera showed nothing unusual, just hours of empty snow and blowing wind. But the second camera had captured something that made my hands shake as I viewed the footage. At 3:17 a.m., a figure had walked into the frame. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and covered in what looked like matted fur or hair. It moved on 2 legs, but walked hunched over, almost bent in half. Its arms were disproportionately long, hanging down almost to the ground. But the most disturbing part was how it moved. It didn't walk through the snow. It seemed to glide over it, leaving those strange tracks, but not sinking down like a normal creature would. The figure stood in front of my cabin for almost 10 minutes, just staring at the door. Then it raised one arm and appeared to wave, as if it knew the camera was there. I stared at that footage for hours, trying to convince myself it was some kind of camera malfunction or trick of shadows and snow. But the image was clear. Something was visiting my cabin at night. Something that definitely wasn't human and didn't match any animal I knew. I tried to radio headquarters to report what I'd found, but my radio was completely dead. No static, no interference, just silence. I checked all the connections and even replaced the batteries, but I couldn't get any signal at all. That's when I realized I was completely cut off from the outside world. The next few nights were the longest of my life. I barely slept, jumping at every sound outside. The wind howling through the trees sounded like voices. The settling of snow on my roof sounded like footsteps. But nothing compared to what happened on January 20th. I woke up around 2 a.m. to complete silence. The wind had stopped completely, unusual for that elevation in winter. I lay in my loft, listening to the unnatural quiet, when I heard something that made my blood freeze. Humming. Someone was humming outside my cabin. It was a tune I recognized, Silent Night, but sung in a voice that was definitely not human. Too deep, too resonant, like it was coming from a much larger chest cavity than any person could have. I crept down from my loft and looked out the window. In the moonlight reflecting off the snow, I could see the figure standing about 30 feet from my cabin. It was even larger than it had appeared in the camera footage. Definitely over 7 feet tall, covered in dark, matted fur. Its arms hung down to its knees, ending in what looked like massive clawed hands. But the most terrifying thing was its face. It was almost human, but distorted. The features were too large, too pronounced. The eyes were black holes in its skull, and its mouth was open, revealing rows of sharp teeth as it continued humming that Christmas carol. As I watched, paralyzed with fear, it began walking toward my cabin. I grabbed my rifle from beside the door and chambered around. The sound seemed to echo through the silent night, and the figure stopped walking. It tilted its head, as if listening, then looked directly at my window. Even from 30 feet away, I could see intelligence in those black eyes. This wasn't just some animal. It was something that could think, that could plan. The creature raised one massive arm and pointed at my cabin. Then it opened its mouth wider and let out a sound that I'll never forget, a howl that was part human scream, part animal roar, and completely filled with rage. I fired a shot through the window. The bullet hit the creature's center mass, but instead of falling, it just staggered backward and looked down at its chest with what seemed like curiosity. Then it looked back at me and smiled, showing all those sharp teeth. That's when I knew I was dealing with something beyond my understanding. The creature turned and walked back into the tree line, moving with that same gliding motion. But before it disappeared, it called out in a voice that sounded almost human. "See you tomorrow, Jake." It knew my name. I spent the rest of the night barricaded inside my cabin, rifle loaded and ready. Every shadow outside my windows looked like the creature returning. Every sound of settling snow sounded like footsteps. When morning came, I found the teeth. Dozens of human teeth scattered in the snow around my cabin in perfect geometric patterns. They were fresh. Some still had blood on the roots. And as I looked closer, I realized they weren't just randomly placed. They spelled out words in the snow. "Winter is mine." I packed my emergency supplies immediately and started skiing toward the main road, 47 miles away. I didn't care about my job, my equipment, or anything else in that cabin. I just knew I had to get away from whatever was living in those mountains.